Hi guys. I'm going to read chapter 7 so that we don't forget what happens in our story. It's called Sixth Grade Island. Mrs. Mitchell looked up from her social studies book. She was in the corner of the room talking about the end of the Civil War with the 8th graders. In the opposite corner of the room, the 4th graders were arguing. It looked like things had reached a boiling point. Carla, please read the 4th question out loud and then lead the discussion. I'll be right back. Walking toward the 4th grade corner, Mrs. Mitchell knew what the problem was. She always knew what the problem was with her 4th graders. Kevin, didn't I ask you all to read silently? She stood over him with her hands on her hips. Kevin said, Shh, we're right in the middle of the best part. It's better this way. Hannah's going to act out the part where the kid climbs out of the volcano. Hannah lifted her nose and said, I am not going to do that. I was never going to do that. It's stupid. Mrs. Mitchell said, That's enough, Hannah. Kevin, when I ask everyone to read silently, that's what has to happen, all right? Kevin shook his head. No, really, because Hannah's got to act out that part so she can fall, and then I can come and rescue her. It's all worked out. We've only got 6 minutes before recess, and if everybody just keeps doing what I said, we can finish the story. It's almost over, really. It's almost over. I know we can finish because it's all worked out. We're doing it as a play. Everything's perfect, except we don't have costumes or anything, but that's okay. We're just imagining, and it's almost over. Hannah, Lizzie, and Keith stood where Kevin had placed them on the reading rug. They knew Mrs. Mitchell was going to win this little battle, but they also knew that they'd better wait until Kevin gave them permission to leave. Kevin, Mrs. Mitchell kept her voice even. Kevin, close your book and look at me. Look right in my face, right here in my eyes. Good. Now, Kevin, I want you to just read the rest of the story, all right? Silently. But it's all worked out, really, and there's only 4 more pages, or maybe 6, but it's going fast. Hannah, come on. Don't you want to be in the play with me? Hannah shook her head. She didn't even want to be in the same universe with Kevin. Mrs. Mitchell said, Kevin, look at my face. At my face, Kevin. Good. You have to sit down and read. Read the story. I need everyone to be quiet and read while I finish with the 8th graders. All right? Kevin rubbed a knuckle under his nose and then got into his pants. All right, but it's not going to be any fun. It's just going to be like words. Mrs. Mitchell said, It's going to be just fine because you are really an excellent reader. Okay, said Kevin, rolling his eyes. Everybody can sit back down at your own grubby little desks because we're going to read the end of the story now. We're going to read, and read until it's all over. Reading, and more reading. After Mrs. Mitchell was sure that Kevin was actually going to sit and read for a few minutes, she went back to the other corner, where the 8th graders were now discussing something other than the Civil War. Sitting near the middle of the large room, Ted had enjoyed watching that drama. He kept looking at Kevin, and then he turned to watch Mrs. Mitchell take charge of the big kids again, and then he went back to his social studies assignment. Ted had claimed the middle area of their large classroom. There were plenty of extra desks around, so Ted had pushed 5 of them together into a pentagon, with just enough room for one chair in the middle, an old swivel chair that he had found at a teacher's desk during the raid of one of the unused classrooms. Ted had a math desk, a science desk, a social studies desk, a reading desk, and a writing desk. Almost 8 feet across, it was his command center, a small 6th grade island. Having 5 desks gave him plenty of storage space. There was room for his mystery books, his small collection of detective equipment, his newspaper bag, his lunch, and a supply of tools Ted kept in his science desk for emergency bicycle repairs. Plus, enough room for anything else he might need to have close at hand, like school books. Room 1 was sort of like a big aquarium, and Ted never got tired of watching the other fish. With 5 desks, he could face in any direction he wanted to, depending on where the action was. His central location also gave Ted lots of practice in observing people. Reading all of the Sherlock Holmes mysteries had taught him that good detective work is mostly watching and listening, and learning to notice important details and writing things down. In room 1, Ted had learned how to watch people so they didn't know he was paying attention. An art that detectives always find useful. And sometimes he sat near Carla and Joan and practiced his secret listening skills. He was amazed by some of the things 8th grade girls talked about. And in a top secret red notebook in his writing desk, Ted kept a file about every person in room 1, even Mrs. Mitchell. From things his teacher had said in class, and from careful observation, Ted knew that Mrs. Mitchell's husband's name was Robert, and that he had worked for the Bureau of Land Management, and that she had thought his job made him spend too much time away from home. Mrs. Mitchell's mom and dad lived in Lincoln now, but she had grown up on Wheat Farm in Cherry County, and she had graduated from Chardon State College. Ted knew Mrs. Mitchell had 2 children, a boy who was a freshman at Wayne State, and a girl who was a sophomore at the same regional high school as his own brother and sister attended. His teacher was 46 years old, and her birthday was April 12th, and she had been teaching school for 18 years, the last 8 years at Red Prairie. Mrs. Mitchell was 5 feet 6 inches tall, with brown hair, dark brown eyes, and a nose with a bump on it. And she had a tiny white scar on her forehead, just above her left eyebrow. She drove a dark blue Chevy Cavalier, license plate number PL7865. Her first name was Barbara. She wore size 8 shoes. Ted finished his social studies, and with 5 minutes before recess, he chewed on the end of his pencil and aimed his mind at his real-life mystery, the one out on County Road 7. Because something April had said had been bothering him all morning. When he'd asked her if her name was Alexa, she got mad and asked him if he had heard that name on the news. Her mom's name on the news. A person whose name is on the news would be in trouble, like maybe lost or in an accident. But there's another kind of trouble that gets a name into the news. Trouble with the law. Because bank robbers got their names on the news, so do kidnappers and burglars and murderers. Ted wasn't sure if he wanted to meet April's mom, Alexa, and it sounded like she didn't want to meet him either. April had said she was scared and she would have left the Andersons if she'd known Ted had been there. But Ted set his fears aside and began to think about the problem of getting more supplies for them, because he told April he would. He turned to his writing desk, pulled out a clean piece of paper, and started a shopping list. After school, he would go to the E&A market, load up, and then write out there again. April had asked for water, had to have water, and toilet paper, also a must. They need bread, and more soup, the kind with plenty of meat and vegetables, and a can opener. Maybe a flashlight or some candles, and instant coffee, and Sterno. Ted knew what Sterno was because his family had gone to the Sunday buffet at the Holiday Inn over in Hulton once, and he had asked the chef about the little cans under the serving trays. His shopping list seemed to be getting longer and longer, and then all of a sudden Ted misunderstood why. 3 people multiplied by breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's 9 meals a day. That's a ton. The size of what he had volunteered to do hit Ted like a sack of grain, and all of this was going to take money too, not to mention time. But he had said that he'd help. He'd shaken hands with April, and he'd said, "See you later." So it wasn't like he had a choice, because a scout is trustworthy, and so is a detective, and a paper boy.